So now, about Buddhism. At the time of Buddha, when Buddha actually, you see, carrying teaching Buddhism, you see, I think something like public teaching, one level, public teaching. I think he used the language, then I think a common language. Maybe later, I think combined these teaching in Pali text, Pali language. That is, say, publicly sort of teach. Then some selected people, among his disciples, some selected, who also have the ability, you see, to see some Bodhisattva like Maitreya Bodhisattva, the Kasa, Kudu Samsala Kasa, Samantapatra Bodhisattva, Manjushri Bodhisattva, our Lokushara Bodhisattva. You see, these form a deity form, not this rough physical, including such sort of disciple. Then another very, very selective, very few individual. Then he carried the teaching of Buddhist Tantrayana. So, right from the beginning, some Buddhist follower, you see, very sort of skeptical about Sanskrit tradition, so-called Mahayana Buddhism, because he not taught these teaching in publicly. So when Nagarjuna come, according sort of Buddhist literature, after 400 years, Buddha passed away. After 400 years, Nagarjuna came. So in his writing, like Precious Garland, you see, he mentioned the Mahayana teaching is actually teachings from Buddha's own teaching and Sanskrit tradition. So like Parijaparamita Sutra is there in Sanskrit language, and it mentioned the, I think, special practice of Bodhisattva, so that eventually describe Mahayana Buddhism. And then also is some the point in Mahayana Sutra, in Mahayana teaching, the importance of the compassion or inner quality rather than physical, verbal discipline. So Vinaya mainly emphasizes the discipline of physical action, verbal action, not much about mental action. The Mahayana teaching emphasizes more on mental sort of discipline. And also, you see, because you see the improvement of mental thinking, so the infinite altruism, that's Bodhicitta, Bodhishin, right? Bodhicitta emphasis. And with that, 6 parameters. You see, these are essence of Mahayana Buddhist teaching. And these in Sanskrit language. Some people, some scholar, even you see, they told me Buddha doesn't speak Sanskrit. I think commonly, maybe true. But for selective sort of individual, selective sort of audience, you see, like Nagarjuna, and these really, the great master not only just, you see, good devotion to Buddha, but actually they're very brilliant sort of people, very, very brilliant. You see, these Tangas, the 17 scholars of Nalanda University, monastic university. So sometimes I describe these masters from the Buddhist viewpoint. As a Buddhist, we consider these are really Buddhist masters. But in the academic field, these people are professors of Nalanda University. The way their presentation about Buddha Dharma, not relying on quotation of Buddha, but rather investigation. And they took the liberty, even as Buddha's own sort of teaching, they examine, investigation, logically. Then they found some of Buddha's own teaching, found some contradiction with our actual sort of, investigation. Then they reject even Buddha's own word. They say Buddha taught this for different purpose, not ultimate reality. So since Buddha himself, you see, expressed or taught his disciple, "Oh, my follower, my disciple, monks and nuns and others, should not accept my teaching out of devotion and out of faith, but rather through investigation and experiment." So that means, you see, he made clear among his own teaching, some teaching purposely taught different way. So my follower should examine, not relying on my word. So, like Nagarjuna, and all these great masters, you see, they carry investigation. One time in Delhi, we have some conference about about historical event about Buddha Dharma. There I mentioned, since Nagarjuna was a kind of person who very, very intelligent one, he even examined Buddha's own word. So he never follow blind faith. He examined. And his thinking is very scientific way of thinking. And then the timing, he came to India, he born in India just after 400-500 years after Buddha's after Buddha. So comparatively closer. Then today's modern scholar after 2,600 years. And then he was Indian. So logically, Indian should know better about India than Western scholars from far away. And then Nagarjuna, a type of person, not just superstitious-minded or blind faith, follower of blind faith. So he examined always. So therefore, the Nagarjuna sort of what's the view about Buddha, about Buddha's teaching, should be really reliable. So he accepted Mahayana teaching. He wrote a lot of commentary about the Panchaparamita Sutra. And then about the Tantrayana. Even within the Mahayana practitioner, Buddhists who accept Mahayana as a true teaching of Buddha, among them, as far as Tantra is concerned, even some of them little skeptical. Because you see, Tantrayana, a few years ago, one Japanese who visited Tibet and then came to see me. And then he told me some temples in Tibet, some temple. You see, he found some temple a little bit dark, and then inside, very wrathful sort of faces, some and blood, skull with blood like that. Oh, then that night he lost his sleep because of fear. Then he told me, Buddhism, basically, he feel very much emphasis about compassion. Then such wrathful, fearful sort of, what's the gods or goddess, fearful. What is that? He mentioned, he asked me a question. He found a little bit sort of contradiction. Then also is one Tibetan monk, I think in perhaps 30s, 40s, when I was very, very small, very young. One monk scholar. He actually come from Mongolia. He very much fond about Pali tradition. So he very much sort of doubt about Tantrayana. So one time, you see, he expressed, you see, after he made one pilgrimage to Lama Tsongkhapa's monastery in Ganden Monastery, and the Lama Tsongkhapa's personal room there. So there are some tantric deities with consort. They are like Guhisamanza and the Hiruka and the Bezaberawa. So later he expressed, even Lama Tsongkhapa's was a private room, some deities looks like that, with consort. So he expressed a little bit complaint. It is very true. See, it is sort of obvious contradiction. You see, we must sort of eradicate desire, certainly sexual desire, and killing, all these. But then, in deity yoga, you deliberately visualize yourself as a wrathful deity and with consort. This is really a contradiction. So we must know. So these are the facts. The Tantrayana is not Buddhism. It is something non-Buddhist sort of tradition, eventually corrupted. And in fact, some Indian historian, one great teacher, one university in I think Patiala University, one great professor, he wrote a book. I also have the copy. I think in 70s, I think, then he no more. Very good scholar, Professor Joshi or something, Professor Joshi. In his book, he mentioned the 3 causes of damaging Buddhism in India, or
Declination.
Degeneration, or eventually disappear. The Buddhism in India, he mentioned 3 causes. Number 1, Buddhist monk, they possess more wealth, and some of the monks become very rich. So public respect lose. Number 1. Second, tantric practice without a proper sort of understanding, without a proper sort of practice, in the name of Tantrayana practice, drinking alcohol or women like that. So that another sort of cause for degenerating or diminishing Buddha Dharma. Then third, some of the sponsors, including kings, rajas, who eventually lost their interest. So the support lost. So he mentioned that. It is quite true. Frankly speaking, in Tibet also, sometimes because of the Tantrayana practice, without the basic qualification, basic quality, just, you see, in the name of practice of Tantrayana, or see the neglect about Vinaya, discipline, these things happen. So these are the reason people losing respect and also develop suspicion about Tantrayana, authenticity of Tantrayana. But then on the other hand, like Nagarjuna, firstly, I think if we know the system of the tantric practice, known well through study, then there is no contradiction. And then like Nagarjuna, as I mentioned earlier, really reliable Buddhist master, very intelligent one, and very scientific-minded. He never accepted easily, unless he experiment or investigation, unless he convince through experiment, through investigation, he never accept easily. So such person wrote, I think, the very detailed and clear sort of explanation about Tantrayana. He himself, according to his disciple, his immediate disciple, he himself, great practitioner of Tantrayana. Meantime, he remained as a good monk, like that. So therefore, if we study thoroughly and read different different sort of commentaries, and examine by yourself, it is really convincing. Firstly, Mahayana teaching is authentic Buddhist teaching. Without Mahayana or Sanskrit traditions, I think Four Noble Truths, difficult to get deeper understanding about Four Noble Truths. first two truths, okay. The third truth, the truth of cessation. Unless you get deeper understanding about the shunyata theory, very difficult to get sort of, what's the convincing sort of understanding about third noble truth. Then as well as fourth noble truth, the true path to achieve the cessation of these destructive emotions. So, like the Dharmakirti's text, mainly is the logic, Buddhist logic, the 4 chapters. The second chapter, the explaining about the Four Noble Truths through reasoning, not through quotation of Buddha's word, but through reasoning. So, without Sanskrit tradition, explanation available in Sanskrit tradition, without that, difficult to kasota, to something like, I think, but I don't know. Difficult to develop kasota, conviction about the possibility of cessation of suffering. So therefore, Sanskrit tradition, of course, the Pali tradition is the basis of Buddha Dharma. Then second Dharma wheel, like Panchaparamita Sutra, is the further explanation about later two truths. The truth of cessation, truth of path. These two truths out of Four Noble Truths, I think without Panchaparamita Sutra's sort of explanation about ultimate reality, which is shunyata. And Nagarjuna, really great sort of master about shunyata. So his explanation is really, really convincing. So after reading or study his sort of explanation about shunyata, shunyata means interdependency. Say, once we read, study that, then the concept of ultimate reality, that shunyata, becomes something reality. Otherwise, just word, emptiness like that, just word. So unless we study Nagarjuna's explanation, difficult to get real sort of the feeling of possibility of cessation. So therefore, the Mahayana teaching or Sanskrit tradition is very, very important. Then Tantrayana. The Tantrayana sort of, what's the immense help to get the real understanding about the possibility of the cessation. Not only not only the afflicted emotion, destructive emotion, but also the bhakja.
Latin imprints. Imprints of delusions.
Imprints of these destructive emotion. Without understanding about the Tantrayana, very difficult to understand that. And then also, according Pali tradition, Buddha is just one historical figure. That's Buddha, only that Buddha. After he passed away, no, nothing. And early part of his life, ordinary human being. Then at Bodhigaya, he enlightened. That's according Pali tradition. Now, according Sanskrit tradition, the four kayas, Nirmana kaya, Sambhoga kaya, and Dhyana kaya, and the Dharma kaya, Dharmata kaya. Four kayas, or Buddha's body, or four Buddhas. So, just one ordinary human being, they eventually enlightened without proper teacher, by himself, and carrying some teaching. And his teaching's effect remain 1,000 years. Not easily, understandable, difficult. And then Nagarjuna also point out the same practice, the Arahata's practice and Buddha's practice, same practice, but big different result. That also illogical. There's also 37 practice for mindfulness, and then the
four mindfulnesses and for abandonments and for miraculous powers and for five strengths. Five strengths, five powers. 7 parts auxiliary to enlightenment. And 8 parts of Arya beings.
So these 37 sort of practice is the common. Mahayana and Hinayana, both is common. Through that practice, achieve Arahata. So the same practice, Buddha's case, through same practice become enlightenment, Buddhahood. That also not sort of satisfactory explanation. The same path, but big different result. Why? Difficult. So therefore, unless you see unless we get some idea about 4 kayas, the type of Nirmana kaya, Buddha Shakyamuni, difficult to do to get clear picture or convincing. So 4 kaya. In order to get deeper understanding about 4 kaya and the systematic how to produce that 4 kaya from this very subtle mind, everybody have that. Sometimes we describe as a Buddha nature or Buddha seed. From this subtle mind, eventually become 4 kaya. That systematic sort of procedure way, unless we study the Nagarjuna sort of writing about Guhisamaja Tantrayana, very difficult to develop convincing way. Conviction. So therefore, you see, these are the main reason the Mahayana teaching is because of the complete explanation about truth. And then Tantrayana is the real method to develop 4 kaya from our subtle mind and energy. So like that. So therefore, that's our explanation. Is the Hinayana, Mahayana, Tantrayana. Of course, Tantrayana, Buddhist Tantrayana. I mean, there is Hindu Tantrayana also there. Even you see practice the breathing and practice of certain yoga, and also practice of Chandalini, Kundalini, and through channels. These are common. So that's the introduction about Tibetan Buddhism. So in short, Tibetan Buddhism, as I mentioned this morning, introduced by Shantarakshita and follow-ups by Shugyara. Followed up by Kamalashila. So these two great masters, as a professor of Nalanda. Of course, Pema Sambhava also immense help for establishment of Buddhism in Tibet. But in public teaching and sort of caring as a teacher, not much. But Shantarakshita, a great philosopher and monk, he gave ordination, Tibetan, and carry study, philosophy, logic, these things, and monastic systems, these established by Shantarakshita. So our tradition is pure Nalanda tradition. It is very true, like that. So as I mentioned this morning, the way our study is, firstly, we learn by heart or memorize these root texts. All these root texts wrote by these Nalanda master. Of course, among the commentary, Tibetan commentary also there, but mainly commentary wrote by those Nalanda masters, like that. So it is quite correct. Tibetan tradition is pure lineage of Nalanda tradition. So usually I explaining to my Indian friend, Indians are our guru. We are chela. Chela means student. Guru, you know, teacher. We are chela. So then I also sometimes teaching them, we are not only just chela or student, but also reliable chela. Because, you know, the Guru's land, in Guru's land, see, recent centuries, as far as Buddhism is concerned, like the Nalanda institution, now completely disappear. And a lot of ups and downs has happened in Buddha Dharma, or the Indian Guru's teaching, Buddhist Guru's teaching. But during this period, we Tibetan faithfully kept these teaching intact. Intact. So that means we are quite reliable chela. So really, the Indians, relation between Indian and Tibetan, we have something very unique sort of relation between teacher and student, like that. So now, as the time comes, we return the precious ancient Indian thought, mainly is to come through Nalanda. We kept more than 1,000 years intact. Now rewrite, retranslation in Hindi, and sometimes composed in Sanskrit. So some are institution now, last few years, now already now doing these things, like that. Okay. So that's about the introduction of Tibetan Buddhism. Then, now about Buddhism. As I mentioned earlier, Buddhism, like Jainism, no God, no creator, but ourselves as a creator. Buddha acted like teacher simply teach us how to transform our emotion and how to transform into ordinary mind, transform into Buddha's mind. So that's Buddha's sort of responsibility, to just show us. He himself, you see, express, I give you path, I show you the path. So whether you achieve your goal or not, entirely up to you. Like that. So since, you see, the Buddhist basic sort of philosophical view is the interdependency, law of causality. Law of causality, the unique Buddhist term is dependent and arising. So here, dependent and arising. No, the law of causality in the Buddhist term,
another reference to the law of causality in Buddhist term is dependent origination.
It's clear. The sound okay. More louder.
Another way of understanding the law of causality according to Buddhism or Buddhist philosophy is through the understanding of dependent origination.
Now in all Buddhist school of thought, that is Vivashik school of thought, Sautantic school of thought, Chitta Mantra school of thought, Madhyamika school of thought, 4 different school of thought. So that Tumda Shijalogi, Tenjin Devar Juan Sadi, Tumda Shijalog Shadi. The Kwazo, the Gunja Dinju Sat Shagori. That in a Madhyamika school of thought Nalia, Tenjin Devar Juan Sadi, Devu, that Jujin the Deva. There's some Gizamaimba, Chajang Church in Shinjela, Rang Chasha Deva. Yala Jaina, Yala Deva. Yala di Yala Jana Deva. Chasha di Chajana Deva. Pensu Dudu said Shayon. Dinde Yindu, Pensu Dune Drua, Saji Gizdi, that Junde Dinjun Sam Maimba, then a Dagbe Dinjun said Shayon.
So when it comes to the view of dependent origination, basically this is accepted by all the 4 schools of Buddhist tenets or Buddhist thoughts. So the common understanding of the dependent origination is on the basis of law of causality, that whatever is born has to be arising from a cause, and therefore cause and result, they are dependent upon each other. This concept is common to all the 4 Buddhist schools. Now, specifically in the case of Mahayana tenets, they say that on top of this understanding, Madhyamika, sorry. In the case of these Madhyamika tenets, on top of accepting the possibility of the dependent origination on the basis of law of causality, they also said that something which is whole has its part and whole, they depend upon each other. So the understanding of the dependent origination is a little bit enhanced in this case.
So in the meaning of Patitsamapanda, there's 2 levels. One, cause and effect. Another, more wider. That
So one understanding is that of law of causality, that cause and result depend upon each other. But a deeper meaning is that things depend upon each other, so things are interdependent.
Now, the interdependency, cause and effect. And obviously, effect entirely depend on cause. It's, I think, even some animals, also some extent, they know. You see, they want something. So they are trying to make effort about causes. That also, you see, according to law of causality. So now, the mathematical philosophy, they further examine. Then they found, or they say, the effect, not only effect depend on cause, but cause also depend on effect. So it does not mean cause come from effect, no. But the very concept of cause happen because of effect. Without effect, the reality of cause cannot exist, cannot become real. So, 지상 두던 제부스 럽지자네 펜주 때도 하다 제부 줄을 때마다 영자래디 두 제부를 때셔버지 쌈 야고 스타는 제도가 제부 모두 모두 그 주척 말와 주셔야지 랑자를 때네 그 주차로.
So the fact that cause and result, they depend upon each other is quite clear when you analyze more. It is a basic understanding that a result has to be arisen from a cause. Because of that, a result is dependent upon cause. So this is the common understanding. Now, when you really analyze deeper, then you also understand that when it has to be a cause, it should have a result. Without a result, you cannot confirm or you cannot say that something is a cause. So on this understanding, cause is also has to depend upon the result, because without a result, you cannot confirm something to be a cause of something else.
So therefore, if we think more deeper way, if we analyze law of causality possible because things are interdependent. So the law of causality prove things are interdependent. Things, since you see, things are interdependent, that means there's no absolute exist or independent existence. Certain thing existence, its existence happen because of other factor. So now this shows the reality not as appears us. We usually discourse, this is result, this is that, like that. So when we, because of pointing this and that, looks something absolute, something independent. But if we investigate, then things are heavily interdependent. Every event, we say, this event happened because of that, because of this. Just single factor we're pointing out, single factor. But I think, of course, this is not a political statement, but you know, the Iraq problem, or the I think Iraq problem, I think administration. Of course, I respect President Bush very much as a human being, very nice person. But as far as his policy is concerned, now I think he pointing out all the problem due to Saddam Hussein. Once Saddam Hussein removed, then everything okay. But the reality not that. Sometime back, I think before Iraq crisis, sometime back when you see people criticize him, one occasion in Germany, I expressed, look, Saddam Hussein, dictator, of course, bad. But unless his sort of powerful army there, that single person cannot be dictator. So dictator happened because of the powerful army. And powerful army without modern weapon, it cannot. So these weapons not produce Iraq itself, but come from other country, including Germany. So, according to law of causality, the producer of dictatorship, these Western nations also involved. Clear? So that's the interdependency. But when we, you see, blame something, we pick up just one target, everything, you see, due to this person.
Blame.
So that attitude is unrealistic attitude, not holistic sort of view, but just single out, single out one factor. The reality, many factors involved. Then you see carry some sort of action. That action become unrealistic, so cannot solve the problem. Clear? So since things are interdependency, so there is no room of one single independent, but appears as something isolated independent factor. So now this shows there is gap, appearance and reality. If everything, in reality, everything in the reality as appears like that, then no further investigation. It just appear, okay, that's the reality. Since we accept there is gap, reality and appearance, so investigation become very important. Like scientific sort of investigation, experiment. So broadly, this, according to science or in many fields, you see, we accept that there is gap, appearance and reality. So now Buddhist philosophy, particularly the Madhyamaka philosophy, say appearance looks independent existence, but the reality, none exists by independently. Everything due to other factor. So here you see concept absence of independent existence there. That's shunyata now. So shunyata or emptiness, something like one coin, one face, emptiness, other face, interdependency. So emptiness does not mean nothingness. Emptiness, absence of independent existence. Clear? My Christian friend, the monk, Father Wayne, Father Wayne or something. When Tisdale, no? That father, great friend of mine, great one. He also, you see, showing genuine sort of support about Tibetan cause. So he always, you see, showing genuine sort of interest about Buddhist meditation, these things, and also Buddhist altruism, these things. One day, he even asked me about emptiness. Then I respond to him, please don't ask that. That's Buddhist business, not your business. Because, you know, I do not want to create some uncomfortable feeling about their concept of God. God, absolute, independent, of course. So the Buddhist concept, everything interdependency. Buddha himself, interdependency. Buddhahood, right? Buddha's enlightenment or Buddhahood, everything interdependency. So there's no room of absolute. So difficult to accept creator. So I told him, of course, their own sort of concept, also very beautiful, very powerful, as I mentioned this morning. Like that. So therefore, the concept of true truth now come. Concept, one truth, on the basis of appearances, without investigation. Then another reality on the level of further investigation. Then because of the ultimate reality. So, true truth. That you can
And there are two truths, one based on the appearance reality and one based on the analytical reality. So the one based on the appearance reality, that is called the conventional truth, and the other one which is found on the actual reality by analysis, that is called the ultimate truth.
Now so to say, in practice level, out of conventional truth, right, on the basis of conventional truth, the most important practice is altruism. We call Bodhisattva. You see, develop genuine sense of concern of others' well-being, and eventually you yourself totally dedicate to entire sentient being. One's own body, mind, speech, entirely submit or dedicate to the sentient being. So that's really the source of inner strength. So that kind of practice reduces extreme self-centered attitude, because self-centered attitude is one of the key factors to develop this destructive emotion. Even you see ordinary people, among ordinary people, those people who always feel something very strong, I, that. And even you see the teasing occasionally, sometimes sometimes develop little trouble, isn't it? Those people who really very gentle, then sometimes even seriously teasing something, they're still laughing, still you see they're very peaceful, isn't it? And dogs also like that. You notice, you see those dogs always barking, and I think self-centered attitude often you see remain lonely. Those dogs who are very peaceful, very gentle, now always more companions there. So we human beings also like that, isn't it? So therefore, you see, self-centered attitude really is the basis of all this destructive emotion. Is one thing. Then theoretical, then philosophical way, they try to understand about ultimate truth. Right? Ultimate truth. Ultimate truth, there is no independent existence. So oneself also, if you investigate, firstly, on a conventional level, I'm here. My body, my speech, my mind, there. And it is logical, I call my body, my mind, my speech, okay. No argument, no contradiction. But if you investigate, where is the I? Whether my I, whether on the body, And then further investigate, I, here, 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 here. No. This all part of my body, not me, not I, not self. It's self's body, my body. And then mind. Of course, then speech. It's just voice come through some body element and energy through combination, this voice come. That's not I. Then mind. Yes, the mind, mental level, awakening state. This very moment, we are using senses for organs, or mind of these senses also is working now this moment, hearing, seeing, like that, and with tea, tasting, like that. So there are sort of sensory level of mind, consciousness. These are not I, because at the dream, at the sleep, you see these sensory sort of consciousness not working, not functioning. Still I there, I sleeping. Then the sleeping state, the certain level of mind, and including dreams. Still, these are, if the mind at the dream state is the real I, then awakening state, no longer sleep, no longer dream, so I no longer there. So we cannot say that. So if we investigate, where is I among the different level of mind, we can't find. At the time of death, the innermost subtle mind occur. If that is real I, then before that, no I. So difficult. Therefore, we cannot pinpoint, this is I, this is self. So if we investigate, we cannot find I. Instead, absence of independent I. So that is conclusion. So when we develop sense of I, strong I, then that understanding immense help to reduce some kind of kasoda, grasping solid I. That also one way to reduce self-centered attitude. And self-centered attitude very much linked with self-grasping. So wisdom side reduce the strong feeling of self-grasping. The altruism reduce self-centered, selfish attitude. So that's the essence of sort of Buddhist practice, particularly according to Mahayana, like that. So now the text, Panchaparamita Sutra, Heart Sutra. It's a Heart Sutra mainly you should deal with these two things. The wisdom which understand shunya and altruism, these two things are the essence of this text. Shijing shung shung kiabar zute pyogal yurshol shashane bumbuti jungni sholokam bumzuye bare. Ani nichi sholokam nichi ngatong dongzhan nyanga basene nichi de dene chi gyatong base aro en dübesene gyatong ba dene ma ani 시진 가이나 숨겨봤을 때는 패지입니다. 도주지 시진 숨겨봐. 다디 시진 냥아봐. 뒤버차다 싫은 거지.
So Prajnaparamita Sutra, on the basis of the number of stanzas, they could be divided as Paramita with billion stanzas, and one with 20,000 stanzas, and one with 8,000 stanzas, and one with 300 stanzas, which is also called Heart Sutra.
Yeah. So this sutra, I think all Buddhist countries were following Sanskrit tradition to recite this sutra. 파고슈지 파르도 침배 인용부 숙소세. 어레 다한테 벽에는 유치균이야. 지금 롱장기 균직 야 롱여배 더 샤바치야기 야 셰룽사로 롱치사로 된저기 치균직 야 롱매베체 시코라도는 뭐 샤바체니 야 세셰사로 시치사로 된저기 치균직 그래서 그게 념치 있으려나 애는 단다디 또 즉 크도 쓰는 마직다 삼동다로 파 드셔시라는 말이지 즉 삼동다로 장장도는 티야로 어떤 저기 뒤에 이니 라메 냠용도는 티야로 라메장 팀이 소소소 니리니리 티카르 당시부터야 크도 즉 곰니 샤곰으로 제제 드르기 토네 티야디 념치세 다야 용치 슬라바이나 라메 냠용고 토네 마 티야제니 로만 마 티즈자네 동부로 미고 동부 찍티 애니 로메 디 미고디 시 둔자카셰 나와지니 링리야 곰 심리야 속도로 걸어 차소나 에야 라마리야 다 곰니 딘지 로르 딘지 셔도 사지 로르 녀어르 딘지 계속선 라마르 슈 애니 라메 디 트레디디야 미고 찍티 도 챤에는 로젠티야 찍 다들 용치스요.
So the classification of the practice by which a lineage is passed has varieties. One which is completely mere oral translation, which has no explanation of the text. One which has also the oral transmission, and which has also the explanation. Now, one in which then there is another one which has no lineage of oral transmission, but mere verbal explanation of the text. And then there is also one which is called experiential teaching, where the Lama, where the teacher restricts the elaboration of the text, but merely stresses on essential or important points by which the students are taught to meditate or on the concept of the practice so taught. And then there's one which has to be kind of an experimental, which is kind of an experimental kind of teaching, where the teacher gives a particular instruction at a particular time, and then with that particular instruction, the student is allowed to practice for a week or a month, and when once the student has gained some experience, then he has to present his own experiences in front of the teacher, and then the teacher shift to the next part of the meditation, and this can be continued for years. So on the basis of the different ways of teachings, these are the differences.
So this particular text, it seems no
has no lineage of explanation.
So only the oral transmission. So now I received this text oral transmission from, I think, my when I was young, I think I received some oral transmission from some Tata Rinpoche, I think, most probably. Then, so now this is the lung yavache, ti yumevache, da inema zaisha sojima ti shashirita.
So the text that His Holiness right now going to teach, the Heart Sutra, is one which has the lineage of oral transmission, but which has no lineage of the explanation. But still, His Holiness wants to explain on the text.
It seems to me is this little different style they give teaching. In Tibet, since I think basically, I think the Tibet, Buddhist country, and people or audience take for granted as a Buddhist, whether they know or not. Basically, they are believer of Buddha Dharma. So the way of teaching, according to that circumstances, some style. Now, the in Indian style, like Nagarjuna's teaching, and of course, Shandadeva, Chandakirti, and Vavibiga, all these great teachers, particularly philosopher, they are sort of teaching. The style is India. There's many non-Buddhist school of thought, so there always is a challenge there, or different views there. So accordingly, they carry the teaching. So, another word, I think Tibetan style. Of course, those Tibetan masters sort of commentary on Indian text. Then, according to the root text itself, you see a lot of discussion there. So they also, you see, carry the discussion. Otherwise, you see, the Tibetan sort of tradition, I mean, those writing only for Tibetan, then discussion is much less. So relying on quotation of Buddha. Those Indian masters are writing, not relying on Buddha's quotation, but reasoning. So now, I think we must return the original text. I feel that's much better, important. And one text wrote by Lama Tsongkhapa, he mentioned Netaba Lungchan Gyurta Chore. Teachir Keki Lotu Dundenta, Namda Rigbe Lotu Mik Jongla, Pei Goe, Gyober Minube, Temben Nella, Never Temple Serviceti.
The stanza says that one should understand the concept of the text in such a way, in such a logical way, that one is completely free of any logical challenges from the opposing or from the opposing parts, and then based on one's valid understanding of the text, one should be able to gain conviction in such a way that one's own conviction in the teachings of Buddha is also enhanced, and the faith is also enhanced.
So not necessary to translate from here. This is what Chanju Gorba. And somebody Yorbe. Oh, then, okay. Okay.
Therefore, in this quotation, it says, Lama Tsongkhapa says, train or cultivate that of the eye of wisdom through reasoning, and not. He doesn't say cultivate the eye of wisdom through by resorting to quotations. So this is how the Indian teachers, Indian masters proceeded when they commented on the teaching of the Buddha. So some of my Tibetan Tibetan brothers and sisters have said that the Dalai Lama doesn't know how to teach. Especially these people have said that the Dalai Lama doesn't know how to teach the Lamrim, the stages of the path of enlightenment. So perhaps they are right, but the way I teach is by following reason. So in Tibet, of course, there are some commentaries to the Heart Sutra, but there's no tradition of teaching the Heart Sutra. So the title of the text was written in Sanskrit and Tibetan, which is called Her Ladyship, the Perfection of Wisdom. In Chinese, there are many Perfection of Wisdom sutras. Do you have in these sutras in Chinese? Do you find any mention of bambos, like sections of the text divided into different sections? In Tibetan, we call them bambos, like sections. Sections. So bamboo is a division of the scriptures into different sections. So these are made in Tibetan, in the scriptures. The bamboos are mentioned in order that so that nobody could interpolate later on into the text and add or delete passages. And bamboo usually starts from the beginning. Right from the beginning of the text, there's mention of bamboo, first bamboo, and so forth. But when it comes to chapters in Tibetan scriptures, chapters are mentioned in the end. So bamboo is the division of text into bamboos is not there in the Sanskrit, but it is there in Tibetan. It seems in Chinese text, somebody said there is this bamboo, and His Holiness has heard that there is one perfection of wisdom called, which is in the 500 bamboos, and then another one which has 400 bamboos or sections in Chinese. Whereas in the 100,000 verses of Panchaparamita Sutras, which is called the extensive Perfection of Wisdom Sutra that we have in Tibetan, this is considered as the middle length of the most extensive Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So there are many Perfection of Wisdom Sutras which are very extensive in Chinese language. So the titles is that Her Ladyship, the Blessed Ladyship, refers to the perfection of wisdom. The primary means by which you become a Buddha, and also in the Madhyamaka text, there's mention of the Arya beings of the Shravakas, Pratyeka, Buddhayana, and then Bodhisattvas, Arya Bodhisattvas, and Buddhas. So because all these four different aryas come from this wisdom realizing emptiness, it is called, the wisdom realizing emptiness is named as her ladyship, the blessed Bhagavati, or perfection wisdom. And then on the other hand, that of bodhicitta is like that of the father. So the perfection of wisdom becomes the mother of all the Buddhas. With regard to wisdom, usually we have the wisdom understanding the 5 different fields of learning, and then the wisdom realizing emptiness, the true nature of how things really are. So we have, as humans, we have intelligence, and for our, in order to increase our knowledge, for our education, we need this intelligence. Traditionally, we talk about the 5 major and minor sciences, and in the major sciences, one of them is the of Buddhism. So here we are dealing with the wisdom to see the true nature of things, although the true nature of things may be understood in different ways, but here we are talking about the ultimate reality, which is also called suchness, or the reality as it is. And so this is what we are dealing with to develop this wisdom, realizing the things, the reality as it is. So, of course, when we talk about developing wisdom and understanding, first of all, either we can read books or we can listen to the teachings from teachers and develop a wisdom or understanding from there, which is called the wisdom arising from learning or studying and listening. And after having learned through this wisdom, then you develop some sort of conviction in the subject by reflecting on it over and over again. And that develop that of the wisdom arising from reflection. And after that comes the wisdom arising from meditation, which is to say that you familiarize your mind with this subject or the object that you choose in your meditation. And then we can develop this further into that of the single-pointed concentration. The first 2 types of wisdom may be developed before you enter a path of enlightenment. And then you enter into the path, but when you develop this the wisdom realizing emptiness as a single-pointed develop that of the wisdom arising from reflection through on the path of accumulation, then you enter into the path of preparation. And so through when you further advance your meditation concentration, you develop that of the insight into emptiness directly. So this is what is termed as the perfection of master, perfection of wisdom. So with regard to perfection of wisdom, we can talk about the perfection of wisdom which is the result, and the perfection of wisdom which leads to that result. So the perfection of wisdom that leads to the result of is that of the wisdom of realizing emptiness, which is in the Arya beings of Bodhisattvas, Arya beings. The resultant perfection of wisdom is that of the ultimate omniscient mind of the Buddha. And the perfection of wisdom in terms of the path is the path realizing emptiness, which are in the Bodhisattvas, Arya beings. And then when these, the result and the path are explained or taught in the text is also named after that, the perfection as named as perfection of wisdom text. So then the text, to begin with the text, thus I heard at one time, and until the community of Bodhisattvas. This shows just the introductory part of the text. So within the community of monks and the entourage or the retinue of beings who were there around the Buddha were those of the amongst them were those of the Bodhisattvas who were deities like Maitreya and Manjushri and so forth, and also there were human disciples. Of course, when we talk about the Gendun or Sangha, it mainly refers to those of the beings on the Arya path. But then we also call the monks Sangha. And the uncommon introduction here is shown by this passage where it is at that time the Bhagavan was absorbed in the concentration on categories of phenomena called profound perception. So profound perception refers to the understanding or wisdom realizing the suchness, and wisdom understanding conventional things. But on the other hand, perhaps we can also interpret it, this profound perception this way. Appearance, perception, appearance may be referred to, can be referred to that of the conventional existence, and then the profundity refers to the ultimate. So even the Chittamatra, the minority school, and also that of the Madhyamakas, those of the Madhyamakas who accept some sort of existence in the objects. The Savatantrika Madhyamakas talk about the profundity and the appearance, but then it's different from different from those of the Prasangika Madhyamakas, who accept that things are merely conditioned. And what that shows, the term mere here shows is that there is no independent existence of phenomena. So they do not accept independent existence even in convention. So profound appearance or profound perception could be, I think, could be understood as referring to the suchness of interdependent origination. while somebody is training on the path to become a Buddha, their absorption in emptiness, total absorption in emptiness, cannot happen while they are dealing with conventional things and activities. So they have to be happen. They have to have happen alternately. But then, once one becomes a Buddha, you have both the post-meditation session and the deep absorption in emptiness directly at the same time, simultaneously. But then in certain sutras, there is mention of the Buddha going on arms round and then coming back and then having finished his lunch, sitting in absorption. So what that is about is that the Buddha was actually assuming as just like an ordinary person. And so this profound perception refers to the Buddha being able to get absorbed in emptiness directly, while also engaging in different activities. With regard to the teaching of the Buddha, the words of the Buddha, we make three divisions. The words of the Buddha which were permitted by him, and which becomes words of the Buddha by permission, and then there are those who which become the words of the Buddha because of being spoken by the Buddha himself, and then there are those which are blessed words of the Buddha. So here, the major part of this text may be said to be belong to the third category. So, and then the next, also at that time, the Avalokiteshvara looked upon the very practice of profound perfection of wisdom and beheld those five aggregates also as empty of inherent nature. So this shows that Arya Avalokiteshvara was absorbed in the emptiness or suchness. So profound, the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom refers to that of the perfection of wisdom, practice of perfection of wisdom. So Arya Avalokiteshvara, seeing that the five aggregates don't have any essential existence, stayed in absorption in the meditation on this profound emptiness. So a person or an I, this notion of I that we have, is actually designated on the basis of the five aggregates. But if you investigate into where this I is, you will not find, as I said earlier. But a human person is designated on the basis of the five aggregates of that of a human person, and similarly, a dog is designated on the basis of the five aggregates of a dog. So these aggregates become the basis of designation of the I or the person. Even those who accept that things have some intrinsic existence, even they say that a person is a person exists by designation. But then they also say that the person himself, the basis of designation of a person is substantially existing. Whereas the Madhyamaka say that if the five aggregates on the basis of which we designate a person, we name a person, if they are without any intrinsic existence, then there's no need to mention that the person who is or who is designated upon these five aggregates is without any inherent or independent existence. Whether it's the Mahamudra tradition or the Dzogchen texture tradition or the Sakya traditions, all of them teach all of them demonstrate the emptiness of the mind on the basis based on tantric practice. So here in the text it says even the five aggregates are be held as being empty of inherent nature. And then through the power of the Buddha, Venerable Shariputra said this to the Bodhisattva Masada Avalokiteshvara: how should any son of the lineage train who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom? He said that, and the Bodhisattva Masada Avalokiteshvara said this to the Venerable Sharadoti-putra: Shariputra, any son of the lineage or daughter of the lineage who wishes to practice the activity of the profound perfection of wisdom should look upon it like this correctly and repeatedly beholding them, and so forth. So here Shariputra asked Avalokiteshvara, how should a son or daughter of lineage train themselves in the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom? And the answer that Avalokiteshvara gives is, Shariputra, how they should look upon it is such that they have to behold them, those five aggregates, as also as empty of inherent nature. And so, of course, this reply comes from our Avalokiteshvara's own experience and also through the blessing of the Buddha. So in certain sutras, based on certain sutras, the Chittamatra reject the existence of external phenomena. And they say that things are non-dual, that they exist only in the mind, and so things without any duality of subject and object. But Madhyamikas reject that. Whereas the Madhyamikas say that we have the appearances of different things. So they say that there is some conventionality of things, whereas ultimately they are empty of some inherent existence. They are empty. Ultimately they are empty. And so this also is not the final view. Although the things appear to have some objective existence to us, this way of existence is merely nominal, and but there is no such way of existence how they appear. So things, the ultimate view of Madhyamaka is that things do not have any inherent nature or inherent existence. In Nagarjuna says in the precious the garland that a person is neither the water element nor the earth, water element, and so forth. And if that is not the person, if these are not the person, then what is a person? And then he answers that a person is made up of 5 different aggregates. You cannot point to any of these 5 elements as being the person, nor the consciousness as the person. So if all of this is not the person, then what else is a person? He asks. Is there some person which dominates the person's mind and body? Or something else? Is there something else? And he says, no, there's no such person which dominates, the mind and body. So Nagarjuna goes on to say that a person cannot be found in these 5 elements and the mind, but then he's not denying the conventional existence of a person, because we talk about practicing altruism and talking about me and they and he and she and so forth. And so we make this distinction between me and others. So you have a person. You talk about me or I in relation to others and others in relation to you. So how does this self or person exist? He says. And Nagarjuna answers that because a person is a combination of the 6 elements, what he's saying is that a person is designated on the basis of the 6 aggregates, 6 constituent factors or elements. So he's saying that neither each of these 6 elements individually are the person, nor the combination of them the person, nor something separate from it. Although we talk about a person whom we seem to point to, we cannot find the person within the aggregates, within these elements. And therefore, how the person exists is not subjectively, the person does not exist from his own side independently, but the person exists by name on the basis of these elements and aggregates. So because a person is designated on the combination of these 5 aggregates on the basis of these 6 elements, he says a person does not exist ultimately. You cannot identify a person from the object itself. Therefore, what this shows is that a person does not exist objectively from his own side, but through designation on the basis of the 5 aggregates and the 6 elements. So this is what Master Nagarjuna also says in the fundamental wisdom, which is there in Chinese, and I've been telling you to study this from since a long time. So in this, Nagarjuna says that the root of samsara, the cycle of existence, is our ignorance about the true nature of things. And how to cut that root is taught in the 18th chapter. And how the ignorance creates karma and so forth are taught in that chapter. And then with regard to how things do not have any inherent nature or inherent existence is taught in the 24th chapter. Master Nagarjuna first brings up the questions or arguments from the realists or the Buddhist realist schools, and then he answers them. And when he answers them that what he meant by emptiness, he says, whatever is dependently arisen is empty. There is nothing which is not empty, which is not dependent, therefore there is nothing which is not empty. And so when Madhyamakas say that everything is empty, they don't mean that nothing exists at all, but how things exist is not independently from their own side, without relying on other factors, but by relying or depending on other factors. And therefore, Nagarjuna says that understanding emptiness as dependent origination and dependent origination and emptiness is the middle way, and this middle way does away with both the extremes of nihilism and eternalism. So, as I said earlier, through the practice of or development of bodhicitta, you do away with or counter that of the self-centeredness, and then there's grasping at a true independently existing self is done away with through the wisdom realizing selflessness. So wisdom realizing selflessness, with regard to that, there are two. One is that of self-grasping at a self of a person, and the other is self-grasping at a self of other phenomena, such as the things around us that we enjoy. And so the first type of grasping at a self, grasping at a person, is done away with or by the realization of the selflessness of a person, and then the second type is done away with the realization of the selflessness of phenomena. Then to move on, so out of the 5 aggregates, the form is very gross. The form aggregate is a very gross one, and then there's of those of the feeling and the compositional factors and so forth, more subtle. So of course we see the forms, the physical things, and people might ask, if we can see and touch these things, how is it that they don't exist inherently? The answer is that these things, they are made up of many different parts. In the Vaibhashika school, they talk about indivisible consciousness and indivisible substance and so forth. But in Madhyamaka and the higher schools, however subtle of matter may be, it's always changing, unstatic. So it's always on the moving. So because it moves, in the second chapter of Fundamental Wisdom Treatise, the chapter on going and coming and going, if something moves, if there's a movement, so when something moves, it moves towards a certain direction, and the place from which it has moved is already, it has passed that. So it has something in front and behind it. And therefore, there is parts, even to this subtle particle which moves has its parts. And because of that, apart from the parts, there is no whole, the particle itself. And without that whole particle, you cannot talk about its parts as well. And similarly, we can talk about, as I said earlier, an object which has different parts and or limbs. Its limbs and the object itself as a whole are interdependent. So we posit all these things as being parts and whole and form and so forth, without making any analysis into the thing itself, but just on the nominal, conventional level. But when you check them, investigate into them, and check and examine them, then you cannot find anything that you can point to as being this and that. Because things are dependent, we can say this is this, this is that, and without that, we cannot talk about relation or dependence or connectedness of things. Therefore, since form is dependent on other factors, it is logical to say that form is dependent on its parts. If if you don't have this dependence in the form, then you cannot talk about form itself. So because the form is empty of any inherent nature, we can talk about it as being dependently arisen. And therefore it says emptiness form is empty, emptiness is form. So when we talk about emptiness of the form, we are actually relating that emptiness to the form, which the form is here, the basis for demonstrating this emptiness of form. So emptiness of form is the true nature or the true the final way in which that form can exist. And emptiness cannot be posited just by itself, standing alone. So emptiness is the nature of the form of empty, the form of which is empty, the property. And similarly, we have impermanence and other properties of form. So we have different properties that we can talk about with regard to in relation to the form. So this is how how our conceptual mind operates on objects, is that it selects the different properties and then say, oh, this is the impermanence of form, this is the emptiness of form, and other properties. So it's very selective in its operation. In the Tantrika philosophical thoughts, when they talk about Rangsen and Chitsen, or self-characterized phenomena and phenomena without self-characterization, they talk about different objects. But here, in Madhyamaka tradition, we have to understand emptiness on the basis of some object. Since form and emptiness of form have this, are said to be of the same nature, therefore it is said emptiness is not other than form, form is also not other than emptiness. So this phrase, form is empty, in the 25,000 perfection of wisdom, and also the Ratnakuta Sutra, it is said that the emptiness of is not annihilated by that of the form is not annihilated by emptiness, but form is empty. So what this shows is that the true nature, the true way of existence of the form is not the way it appears to us. So form appears in a certain fashion to us, but that's not the way it truly exists. And therefore, so if we were to say that the form exists the way it appears to us, even at the conventional level, if we were to say that the form exists the way it appears, and then say it's empty of ultimate existence or ultimate nature, inherent nature, then it would be like the emptiness annihilating the existence of form itself. So while leaving the form untouched, if you say the form is empty of inherent existence, then you are not actually able to see the true nature of the form, but something else. So form has no existence, objective existence at all. Therefore, you can say it's empty of inherent nature. And similarly, in the same way it says feelings, discrimination, composition, defective consciousness are empty. All these objects, the basis of the property of emptiness, are also empty of any inherent existence. If you check into the true way of existence, you will not find them at all, but you'll find them to be empty of inherent existence. So we have this notion of I, and so this sense of I comes on the basis of the 5 aggregates, and particularly on the basis of this the continuity of mind. Even in the material things, we can see their continuity, some physical continuity, but then you cannot have the sense of I. And therefore, a person is designated on the basis of the mind stream. So gu, or in the Tibetan word gu, or continuity, and another word in Tibetan for gu is gun. Gun, as it comes in the explanations of Tantras, gu means gun, which means a continuum means a continuity. And therefore, this continuity of mind is said to be a very stable basis for designation of a person, as Brahmanavartika says. So just as emptiness is mentioned in relation to form, likewise you can say consciousness is empty, emptiness is not other than consciousness, and consciousness is not other than emptiness. And then the next passage, in the study of perfection of wisdom text, there is mention of the 8 profound factors. Because things are empty of inherent existence, which is the way they appear to us, they are said to be empty in that sense. And also things are form and feelings are said to have their own particular characteristics and general characteristics, defining characteristics. But even these defining characteristics of form and feelings and so forth, you cannot find them when you examine them carefully and closely. Even in the case of causality, we can talk about effects arising from causes and conditions giving rise to them, but then causes and conditions cannot be posited without relation to each other, without not taking birth refers to the cause and effect not arising or ceasing without relation to the other. And then the destructive emotions and the result or effect of them, the origin of suffering and suffering of course can be overcome, but there is no inherent overcoming of them. And similarly, the cessation and path cannot be attained and cultivated inherently, although conventionally we do talk about cultivation of these and abandoning or overcoming of the it seems these 8 different properties of the profound emptiness is explained on the basis of the path of, in relation to the path or in connection with the path of seeing. So, from the point of view of this path of seeing, which is totally absorbed in emptiness, there is no such thing as form and feeling and so forth. Until the I element and so on and up to and including the mind element, no mental consciousness element. So of course things do have their characteristic features, but then these characteristic features do not exist in and of the objects themselves. They do not exist as the ultimate reality of these things. So this is what is taught by that, and then the text goes on to say there is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, and so on and up to, including no aging and death, and no extinction of aging and death. Starting from ignorance, we have that 12 links in the usual order, and then there's also the cessation of these 12 links, which goes like the cessation of ignorance. By stopping the ignorance, that of the karma stops, and then the rest also, the rest of the links also stop. So these are in terms of how we proceed into samsara, beginning with ignorance, and then how we actually go out of samsara by overcoming ignorance, and then the rest of the links, 12 links. In terms of the Four Noble Truths, the Buddha teaches the 12 links of dependent origination in relation to the first two noble truths. And then in terms of the reversal of samsara, or overcoming samsara, the Buddha teaches that of overcoming the ignorance. Here, in the process of overcoming ignorance, first we develop certain insight which overwhelms this ignorance, and then we reach certain path and level of path where we see that of the emptiness directly and reach the Arya path, and then advance towards that of nirvana, or liberation, which is the final cessation. And then the next passage, similarly, there is no suffering until no non-attainment, also refers to the this is also taught in connection with the path of seeing. So how the Arya beings see the emptiness directly is something which is beyond expression and beyond words and so forth. Therefore, we have this verse which says, I pay homage to the Mother of Perfection of Wisdom, which is inexpressible, beyond words and so forth, beyond thought and so forth. And then next passage, Shariputra, therefore, because there is no attainment where these bodhisattvas rely on and dwell in the perfection of wisdom, the mind without obscuration and without fear. So this refers to the non-dual insight of the path of meditation, which overcomes the rest of the destructive emotions and advance on to overcoming, destroying, or uprooting the subtlest defilements. So, with the help of that of bodhicitta, when you practice the six perfections, and particularly that of the wisdom realizing emptiness, the perfection of wisdom, this path helps in developing the final path of meditation called the Vajra-like path of meditation, which acts as an antidote to that of the subtlest defilement. And then once you get rid of that, then you reach that of Buddhahood. So when you reach a Buddhahood, there is no appearance of things having some independent existence as such. So until then, during the path, during the levels of the bodhisattvas and the trainee level, you still, even when you meditate on emptiness, there is some appearance of things having some kind of objective existence. But once you become a Buddha, this objective existence of things are not there. So having completed the path beyond error, they reach the end point of nirvana, All Buddhas who dwell in the three times also manifestly completely awaken to the unsurpassable perfect complete enlightenment in reliance on the perfection of wisdom. So the Buddhas, all the Buddhas of the three times, past, future, and present, reach that final enlightenment on the based on or relying on this perfection of wisdom. So even for us, there is possibility for us to reach that goal of enlightenment or Buddhahood on the base or relying on this perfection of wisdom. This morning I talked about the mind. The basic nature of the mind itself is that it's neutral, and the defilements are not intrinsic to them, to this basic nature of the mind. So because of that, we sometimes become attached and sometimes become angry. And we even in relation to a single person, we can develop anger or attachment and desire to that person. But the anger or desire, these two do not happen simultaneously, because desire or attachment is something which embraces the person, whereas that of anger is something which averses the person. And so therefore these two cannot go together simultaneously. Although they can happen, these two can occur in us one after the other. So this basic mind becomes tainted by anger at some times, and at other times by attachment or desire. So since it's like it's a neutral, like clear water, just you can taint it with or color it with different colors. So this contamination of the water does not, although water becomes contaminated, that contamination doesn't become the intrinsic nature of it. So similarly, when we can also stay without being influenced either by attachment or anger, but just remain just in that state, nature of the mind. And so these anger and desire and the other destructive emotions are not in the intrinsic nature of the mind, and therefore we can say that we can separate the mind from these destructive emotions. Whereas and then these destructive emotions do not have any valid support from valid cognition, and therefore we can see that possibility of overcoming them or separating our mind from them. Whereas the basic nature of the mind can be enhanced further and further through meditation. And then we basically have that what we call that Buddha nature. And on the basis of this, we can talk about the possibility of becoming a Buddha and also developing the altruism.
Thank you. So now, about Buddhism. At the time of Buddha, when Buddha actually, you see, carrying teaching Buddhism, you see, I think something like public teaching, one level, public teaching. I think he used the language, then I think a common language. Maybe later, I think combined these teaching in Pali text, Pali language. That is publicly sort of teach. Then some selected people, among his disciples, some selected who also have the ability, to see some Bodhisattva like Maitreya Bodhisattva, the Kasa, Kudu Samsala Kasa, Samanta Bhattara Bodhisattva, Manjushri Bodhisattva, our Lokuchara Bodhisattva. These form a deity form, not just rough physical, including such sort of disciple. Then another very, very selective, very few individual. Then he carried the teaching of Buddhist Tantrayana. So, right from the beginning, some Buddhist follower, very sort of skeptical about Sanskrit tradition. So, and these in Sanskrit language. Some people, some scholar, even they told me Buddha doesn't speak Sanskrit. I think commonly, maybe true. But for selective sort of individual, selective sort of audience, like Nagarjuna, and these really, the great master not only just good devotion to Buddha, but actually they're very brilliant sort of people, very, very brilliant. These Thangas, the 17 scholars of Nalanda University, monastic university. So sometimes I describe these masters from the Buddhist viewpoint. As a Buddhist, we consider these are really Buddhist masters. But in the academic field, these people are professors of Nalanda University. The way their presentation about Buddha Dharma, not relying on quotation of Buddha, but rather investigation. And they took the liberty, even as Buddha's own sort of teaching, they examine, investigation, logically. Then they found some of Buddha's own teaching, found some contradiction with our actual sort of, investigation. Then they reject even Buddha's own word. They say Buddha taught this for different purpose, not ultimate reality. So since Buddha himself, was this expressed or taught his disciple, "Oh, my follower, my disciple, monks and nuns and others, should not accept my teaching out of devotion and out of faith, but rather through investigation and experiment." So that means, he made clear among his own teaching, some teaching purposely taught different way. So my follower should examine, not relying on my word. So, like Nagarjuna, and all these great masters, they carry investigation. So, one time in Delhi, we have some conference about about historical event about Buddha Dharma. There I mentioned, since Nagarjuna was a kind of person who very, very intelligent one, he even examined Buddha's own word. So he never follow never follow blind faith. He examined. And his thinking is very scientific way of thinking. And then the timing, he came to India, he born in India just after 400-500 years after Buddha's after Buddha. So comparatively closer. Then today's modern scholar after 2,600 years. And then he was Indian. So logically, Indian should know better about India than Western scholars from far away. And then Nagarjuna, a type of person, not just superstitious-minded or blind faith, follower of blind faith. So he examined always. So therefore, the Nagarjuna view about Buddha called Mahayana Buddhism, because he not taught these teaching in publicly. So when Nagarjuna come, according Buddhist literature, after 400 years, Buddha passed away. After 400 years, Nagarjuna came. So in his writing, like Precious Garland, you see, he mentioned the Mahayana teaching is actually teachings of Buddha, Buddha's own teaching and Sanskrit tradition. So like Paramita Sutra is there in Sanskrit language, and it mentioned the, I think, special practice of Bodhisattva, so that eventually describe Mahayana Buddhism. And then also is some the point in Mahayana Sutra, in Mahayana teaching, the importance of the compassion or inner quality rather than physical, verbal discipline. So Vinaya mainly emphasizes the discipline of physical action, verbal action, not much about mental action. The Mahayana teaching emphasizes more on mental discipline. And also, you see, because you see the improvement of mental thinking, so the infinite altruism, that's bodhicitta, bodhishin, right? Bodhicitta emphasis. And with that, 6 paramitas. You see, these are essence of Mahayana Buddhist teaching. About Buddha's teaching should be really reliable. So he accepted Mahayana teaching. He wrote a lot of commentary about the Paramita Sutra. Then about the Tantrayana. Even within the Mahayana practitioner, Buddhists who accept Mahayana as a true teaching of Buddha. Among them, as far as Tantra is concerned, even some of them little skeptical. Because you see, Tantrayana, a few years ago, one Japanese who visited Tibet and then came to see me. And then he told me some temples in Tibet, some temple. You see, he found some temple a little bit dark, and then inside, very wrathful sort of faces, some and blood, skull with blood like that. Oh, then that night he lost his sleep because of fear. Then he told me, Buddhism, basically, he feel very much emphasis about compassion. Then such wrathful, fearful sort of what's today, appear, the gods or goddess, fearful. What is that? He mentioned. He asked me a question. He found a little bit sort of contradiction. Then also is one Tibetan monk. I think in perhaps 30s, 40s, when I was very, very small, very young. One monk scholar. He actually come from Mongolia. He very much fond about Pali tradition.